All right, so let's get into Chapter 7, Lesson 2. Now, we talked about exponents, and then I reviewed the order of operations on Chapter 7, Lesson 1. Well, this is an expression because it is a math problem written out with a base and an exponent, or a power, as it indicates there. Another way I could say an expression is a math problem that has several things inside of it. Okay? So this is an expression as well, a multi-step math problem that doesn't have an answer to it. That's what this chapter section is all about. When you get into a couple of them, your eyes might kind of bug out of your heads and your mind might start spinning because they look a little overwhelming. But I promise, if you go through the order of operation every single time, these are not difficult math problems. So looking at what we're talking about, number one, we're talking about a numerical expression. So we have multiple things that can take place. This is an expression. It is a math problem that doesn't have an answer to it. This is an expression. It's a math problem without an answer. An expression. Math problem without an answer. Numerical means it has all numbers. We will get into, before too long, some algebra. So we'll have algebraic expressions where we'll have some of these also have letters in there. This could be a B or a Q or a Z. When we evaluate just means to solve. It's a big fancy word that says, hey, do the math that you know how to do and get to the right answer. Should be pretty easy to do. Order of operations is the key to doing this and doing it successfully. Order of operations. Now they give this information to you in the book. I truly believe the easiest way to do it is remember this saying inside of your brain, commit to what it means. Ask for several extra presents from my dear Aunt Sally. We've gone over it several times so far this year. We will continue to go over it throughout the rest of this year. When I start with the asking, that's talking about absolute values. We've talked about absolute values. How many steps is it from 0 to -5? 5 steps. How many steps is it from 0 to +5? 5 steps. Any number inside the absolute value lines is just going to be written as a positive number within itself. Absolute value. Pretty easy once we learn what it is. So I asked for several square roots. We haven't done square roots yet. We will introduce it later on, a lot later on in the school year. It's not actually a 6th grade standard for me to teach it and spend a lot of time on. But basically what it's saying is, if I take a number and multiply it by itself, I get the number that's on the inside. So 1 times 1 is 1. 6 times 6 is 36. 11 times 11 is 121. So when I see the square root sign and I see 64, I have to know my multiplication of doubles back from 3rd and 4th grade. If it's square root of 64, I know 8 times 8 is 64. So the square root would be 8. Ask for several extra exponents. That's what we started with in the previous lesson for Chapter 7, Lesson 1. There's a base, there's an exponent or a power, and I know to take the base and multiply it by itself, however many times this says. So I would change this to 4 times 4, which is 16. Ask for several extra presents, parentheses. Pretty easy. Whatever inside of those fancy little squirrely lines there, you're going to do that math. Then I do my multiplication and division. This is the one that some people get tricked up on because sometimes we'll see division coming first and they say, well, I got to go over and do multiplication. That's not the case. Multiplication and division all gets done first and I go from left to right. If they show division first, I do division first and then I do the multiplication. Then Aunt Sally, addition and subtraction, works the exact same way. If subtraction is listed first, I do subtraction followed by addition. Whatever order, then addition and subtraction is going to go from left to right. So as long as I follow these steps in these math problems, they become pretty easy. It's just taking the time to do them right and rebuilding my math problem each step that I go. They give me this problem here. It says, an archer shoots 6 arrows at a target. 2 arrows hit the ring worth 8 points. 4 arrows hit the ring worth 4 points. Evaluate the expression 2 times 8 plus 4 squared to find the archer's total number of points. So 2 times 8 plus 4 squared. Where do I begin? I begin with the order of operations. Always have to start there. Ask for, no absolute value. Square roots, no. Exponents, yes. So I have to start with my square root, or my exponents, excuse me, 4 squared. My base is 4, so that tells me I'm going to take 4 and I'll multiply it by itself. 4 times 4 is 16. I'm going to plug it in, and I'm going to rewrite my math problem that I have left. I bring down my 2, I bring down my multiplication, I bring down my 8, I bring down my addition sign, then I plug in a 16. So I have 2 times 8 plus 16, because 4 times 4 is 16. Let's see, then I have to go to multiplication and division from left to right. It comes first, so I have to do 2 times 8, which is 16. So I'm going to multiply from left to right. 2 times 8 is 16. Bring down the plus, bring down the 16. That leaves me with addition, because I'm going to add then from left to right. 32, because 16 plus 16 makes 32. So the archer scores a total of 32 points. Step by step every single time. Rewind this problem and rewatch it step by step so you're following along on what I was doing. All right, so when I have things like this, then it says evaluate, once again, big fancy word that means solve the problem, of the expression, a math problem without an answer, of 24 divided by 2 cubed. Order of operations is always going to be the key to being successful with these math problems. So I know I have to start with absolute value and square roots, which I don't have, but I'm going to have my exponents. So I'm going to take my 2 cubed. What does 2 cubed, or 2 to the 3rd power, look like written as a math problem? Hopefully in your mind you're thinking 2 times 2 times 2, because it says to write that base 3 times. So 2 times 2 times 2, handy dandy calculator, pick it up, type it in, 2 times 2 times 2, that gives me 8. So I'm left with 24 divided by 8. So I know my next step is to multiply and divide from left to right. I put down my division box, but which one goes inside my division box? We haven't really reviewed that a lot since the first month of school. The first number always goes on the inside. My first one is always my dividend. My second one is always my divisor on the outside. So 8 or 24 divided by 8 is the way I say it. And the one that's inside the box is the one I type into my calculator first. 24 divided by 8 gives me an answer of 3. So I know my final evaluation, my final answer, is simply 3. Wow, let's look at this one. Now that's a lot of math, isn't it? So this is where your eyes might start bugging out and your brain might be twirling around in your head. 72 divided by, in parentheses, 13 minus 4, plus 5 times 2 cubed, or 2 to the 3rd power. Wow, that's a lot of math, and it doesn't make any sense if I don't understand my order of operations. The key is going to be every single time to know my my order of operations. As long as I do that and I know it and I follow it, I'm golden. I'm going to be able to do this every single time. I know that I have asked for several extra presents, my absolute value, square roots, exponents, and parentheses. My dear Aunt Sally, so I have multiplication and division from left to right, addition and subtraction from left to right. From where do I start? Absolute values? No. Square roots? No. Exponents? Yes. I do have an exponent. But notice I have parentheses that come first over here. That's okay, because the way that they're grouped like this, I can do any of these in any order from left to right, as long as it doesn't change my answer. Okay? Multiplication and division are grouped together because I put them from left to right. Addition and subtraction, I do them from left to right. My parentheses comes first here from left, so I'm going to do it before I do my exponents. So I'm going to take my 13 minus my 4, which is my parentheses, and I get 9, and I plug that into my math problem. So I have 72 divided by 9 plus 5 times 2 to the 3rd power, or 2 cubed. Now I go back to this grouping, and I say I still have an exponent up there. So I'm going to do my exponents next. So I have 2 cubed, once again, that's 2 times 2 times 2. I write it 3 times because that's what the exponent tells me. And 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. So I'm going to plug my 8 in there. I rewrite my math problem every single time. Now, Some of you are going to try to do the shortcut, and you're going to try to do everything you possibly can, and you're going to get yourself all confused. I'm telling you, because my college professors told me, my high school teacher told me, and my first year of algebra, which I took as an 8th grader, my teacher told me, Mrs. Dunn, show every step and rewrite your math problems so you don't get confused and you don't make mistakes. It's the students that try to rush and they do the shortcuts, then they get all sorts of mistakes in here. So I want to rewrite. I bring down my 72, I bring down my division, I bring down my 9, I bring down my addition, I bring down my 5, I bring down my multiplication, and now I have an 8 because 2 cubed is 8. Take your time and do it right line by line. These are the type of assignments I really suggest that you get the line paper that's over here because it's going to be a lot easier for you to keep track of your work. Now what I do. When I'm done with my first grouping, absolute value, square roots, exponents, and parentheses, they're all done. Now I have to do multiplication and division from left to right. I'm not going to jump over here and do multiplication. I'm going to start with my division. 72 divided by 9 is my division that I'm given, and 72 divided by 9 is 8, so I'm going to plug in my 8. I bring everything else down. So I have my 8, I bring down my addition, my 5, my multiplication, and the 8 from previous step. Now I'm left with still multiplication and division from left to right because now I have to multiply. So I have my 5 times my 8. 5 times 8 is 40. So I'm going to plug in my 40 here. Now I'm left with 8 plus 40, and 8 plus 40 is 48. So we went from this math problem that we haven't seen a lot of unless we've been doing some of the math computer skills that I've assigned to you, and you've gotten into those really hard math problems, or maybe you got that high on NWEA. But for the majority of 6th graders, we haven't seen that type of math before. It's just simply going through the order of operations, step by step by step, and we'll get the right answer. When you sit down with your partners at your table, you're working and you're talking together, and somebody gets one answer, somebody gets the other, then check each other's work and see if maybe they skipped a step or did it in the wrong order, or maybe they just added 40 plus 8 and got 46 on accident. All right, so when we look at these then, now it says, well, we're going to use this story problem, we're going to figure out what the expression should be. All right, so it says, last month, an online bookstore had approximately 10 to the 5th power, or 10 with an exponent of 5 visitors to its website. On average, each visitor bought 2 books. Approximately, how many books did the bookstore sell last month? Write an expression. So that's where we have to start. Step 1, write the expression. It gives me 10 to the 5th power times a number. Well, what number am I going to multiply by? Well, I'm trying to find out in the end how many books I'm selling, and I know that this is the number of visitors, but this is the number of books that each person bought, approximately. So I know I'm going to multiply it simply by 2. So then I can do my order of operations. It tells me to find my exponent first in this first grouping. So I'm going to take 10 to the 5th power. So 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. All right, so once I get all those written down, then I simply have to type it into my calculator. I type it in 5 times, that equals 100,000. Well, 100,000 then times 2 gives me 200,000. So about how many books did they sell in a month? Well, last month they sold about 200,000 books. Not difficult, as long as we follow the order of operations. All right, so here's a 3-step math problem. Where do I have to start? So look at it. Hopefully you notice you have parentheses, but inside of the parentheses is an exponent. So you have to start with your exponent first. So my exponent is 5 squared, or 5 to the 2nd power, which tells me to multiply 5 by 5. And 5 by 5 gives me 25. So I know I'm going to rewrite my math problem then. 9 plus, I keep my parentheses, so I keep it all in the same order until I'm ready to move on. I have my 25 minus the 10. Now I can subtract because that's my next step, is to solve inside the parentheses. 25 minus 10 is going to give me 15. Now I'm left with adding 9 plus 15 is going to give me 24. I have to make sure I put them in the right order and I go in the right order. I gave you a handout several months ago and asked you to put it in your math folder, so hopefully you still have it. And if you don't, by this time on yesterday's video and today, you should at least have these steps written down inside of your book or even on extra notebook paper to put in your folder so you can pull out during tests and during your assignments. All right, so I'm going to put it in regular terms what these directions say. The directions say evaluate the expressions. So this says solve the math problems that don't have the answers. That's all it's saying. So I have to follow once again my order of operations as I go through here. All right, so I know I don't have square roots, I don't have parentheses, I don't have absolute values, but I do have an exponent. So I have to start with my exponent of 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So I'm going to plug that in where the other things were brought down. So 6 plus 27 divided by 9. Now I have my deer. I have to do my multiplication and division from left to right. So 27 divided by 9. I bring down my 6 in my addition. I take 27 divided by 9, that is 3. So I'm going to be left with 6 plus 3, and 6 plus 3 is equal to 9. So the answer to this expression is simply 9. Now number 3 gets a little tricky. Notice where that exponent is. Okay, so they're just suddenly putting that into our practice problems, even though they didn't introduce it to you. So if you're paying attention, then homework won't be as difficult as long as you're paying attention. The first thing I have to do is I have to solve inside of my parentheses and then realize that that exponent belongs to whatever that answer is. So I have to solve my parentheses first from my ask for several extra presents. I'm going to start with 15 minus 3, and 15 minus 3 is going to be what? It's going to be 12, right? Well, I have to keep that exponent. I have to keep my division by 9 to figure out what my answer is. When I take 15 by minus 3, I get my 12. So I'm actually going to have 12 squared, or 12 to the second power. That tells me now I have to take 12 times 12, because that's what that exponent tells me to do. Write it down 2 times, multiply it together. So 12 times 12 then is 144. I have to keep my division by 9 in the same place. I plug in my answer of 144. I rebuild my math problem every step that I solve so I don't get confused and leave anything out. Now, okay, so first number goes as high in my division box. I'm dividing by my second number, which is my divisor. So I know I'm going to take 144 divided by 9, or I can just type it in that order into my handy dandy calculator. 144 divided by 9 equals, and I get an equal number of 16. So my answer to this expression is going to be 16. Now number 4, they put the exponent on the inside of the parentheses, which tells me I have to do that first, and then I have to solve for the parentheses that's left. So I have to start with my 9 times my 9, which is my exponent, which is going to give me 81. I have to keep everything else the same inside of where it goes so that everything stays in the right order. When I do 9 times 9 equals 81, I simply plug it in into that empty space inside my parentheses. Now I can solve for my parentheses. I have 8 plus 81, which is going to be equal to, well, 8 plus 81. Oh, that should actually be 89. I messed up on that, so I apologize. So it's not going to look right on my board. That should be 89. So 89 should be plugged in here, minus 4 times 10. Now I have my multiplication. So I have 4 times 10, and 4 times 10 is going to be 40. So I should have 89 minus 40 once I do my multiplication, and I plug it in. 89 minus 40, not 90, 89 minus 40 would then give me 49 as my answer, and not the 50 that it appears to be on my board. All right, so I would like you to solve some problems here. Evaluate these expressions and see what your answers are. So there are 3 of them. You should be able to do them following the order of operations, then come back and check your work, and I'll give you step by step on how they should be done. All right, so hopefully you have answer 5 done. Let's see how we did. Your answer should be 18. The steps you should have gone in is you should have started with your exponents, which is 6 times 6. That gave you 36. That left you with 10 plus 36 times the 2 divided by 9, because everything else was dropped down. Then you have to do multiplication and division from left to right, which means you have to multiply by 2 first. 36 times 2 is 72. Then you have to divide by 9. And 72 divided by 9 gives you 8. If you tried to do the 2 divided by 9 and then multiply by 36, you get a really wacky answer. Once you got your 8, then you were just left with adding it to 10. You should have gotten 18. So if you have 5 correct, you haven't done 6 or 7 yet, or you think maybe after you work this out, you might have gotten those wrong, go ahead and pause the video and come back. If not, let's look at what we got for 6 and 7. So on 6, you should start with your exponent here and your exponent here. Once you solve for both of those exponents, then you do the parentheses, and then finally you would finish with your subtraction. So you should have gotten the answer of 23. 6 times 6 is 36, and 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. You added those together, you get 13, and then 36 minus 13 gave you 23. And then for number 7, you should have started with your exponent, gone to division, and then added, and then added. You should end up with an answer of 99. With your exponent, you have 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which gave you 81. And then you did your division, and 18 divided by 9 is 2. That left you with 16 plus 2, which gives you 18, plus the 81, which gives you 99. All right, so now let's look at these. These are a little tricky because you have to work it several times until you get it in the right spot. You might be a good guesser, but unless you prove to me that you have it in the right spot, you don't get the credit for showing your work. What this says is that you're going to place parentheses, and you have to put them in the right spots to get to the right answer. So my process of elimination is I put them around the first 2 numbers, and if that doesn't work, the next 2 numbers, the next 2, until it does work. Let's look at what I'm talking about. So I put parentheses around the first 2 because I know I have to add parentheses and get an answer of 10. And when I do that, then I have 10 squared, well, 10 squared, 10 times 2 is 100, minus 50. So that would give me 100 minus 50, which is 50. And 50 divided by the 5 is 10. I know that that would be where my parentheses needs to be. So what my answer looks like is this math problem with parentheses entered in front of the 10 squared and after the 50. Right? It's not what the answer is because they've already told you the answer should be 10. It's writing it correctly with parentheses added. Now 9 is a frustrating trial of error. If I do it with around my first 2 numbers, which is what I did, okay, it was this trial and error, I put it around my first 2 numbers. When I did that, I worked through the process, and I got to an answer of 114. I knew that wasn't right. So then I put it around the next 2 numbers. Well, around the next 2 numbers would have been around the 2 and the 5. And once I worked through that process step by step, I got to an answer of 34. And so I knew that one wasn't right. So then I put it around the last 3 numbers. Okay? So every single time I had to build these step by step. So when I put it around the first 2, I got 22. And then I solved by multiplying 22 times 5, which is 110, plus 4 is 114. That didn't work. Then I moved it around the next 2, around the 2 and the 10. So I multiplied 2 times 5, which is 10. That gave me 20 plus 10 plus 4 to the first power. 4 to the first power is just 4. So 20 plus 10 is 30 plus 4 is 34. So that wasn't right. So then when I went around the last 2, I have 5 plus 4 to the first power, once again, which is 4. So when I add inside the parentheses, I got a 9, and 20 plus 2 times 9. Well, 2 times 9 is 18, and 18 plus 20, that gave me my 38. So I knew that my parentheses had to go around the last two. It took a while to get to that answer, but it's worth being right and showing grit and persevering until the end to where we know that we have the correct answer. All right, so number 10 then. I want you to try on your own, figure out where it's going to be. Now you only have two that you would have to work. It's either going to be around the front two or around the last two. So find out where the parentheses should go and then come back to me and check your work. All right, so hopefully you started out. You put it around the first two and you realized, well, when I do my 2 squared, which is 4, and 28 divided by 4 is 7, and 7 plus 3 is 10, that didn't give me the answer 4 that I needed. So when I put it around the last two, and 2 times 2 is 4, and then I added 4 plus 3 is 7, the 28 divided by 7 is 4, and that is indeed what it's supposed to be. Once again, the answer is, it's the expression here that doesn't have an answer to it. I already know the answer is 4, but I need to show that my parentheses goes around the last two. All right, so here's just an extra thought. Might be important for tonight's homework if we're paying attention. How many pounds are equivalent to 60 ounces? Now that's where we have to use our previous book that we had, or if you take out the chart that I gave you before Christmas break when we went through chapter 6, all of those conversions, then you'll know that we have so many ounces in a pound, 16 ounces for every pound. So how many pounds are equivalent to 16 ounces? Well, now I have one of two possible answers. I can either use it as a fraction mixed number, or I can show it as a decimal. I don't care as long as I have the right number and right label. So I know I'm going to take my 60 and divide it by 16 because there are 16 ounces for every 1 pound. Well, when I type in 60 divided by 16, I get a whole number and stuff, right? So I take my whole number, which is 3, and 3 times 16 is 48, gives me a leftover of 12. Now, if I am a fraction person, then I'm going to use it as a mixed number. I'm going to take my remainder, it is always my numerator, my divisor is always my denominator. So I end up with 12/16, but then I have to reduce that. I could reduce it by 2 and get 6/8, but then I have to reduce it by 2 again. I could reduce it by 4 and do it all in one step. But I have to get to the right answer, which is the reduced fraction form of 3 3/4 pounds. If you're more of a decimal person, then by all means, please use the decimal form. You take your 60, divided by 16, you get your 48 with a remainder of 12 again. Then we start adding our decimals. We add a 0. We know that 16 will go to 127 times, which is 112. We have 8 left over. 16 goes in 85 times. So we get 3 7/75, or 3.75 pounds. Either one would be the correct answer. Knowing how to do that might help knowing how to do a problem on the back for homework tonight. So your assignment, yes, number 11 is one of them I expect you to be able to do once again. Now I'm telling you, these are easy to do. You know it's going to be correct when you enter it into the calculator because you are putting it into the calculator. You're putting them in correctly in the order of operations. Understand your order of operations is key to being able to do any of these problems. As long as you get to order of operations, then your calculator is there to help you solve it correctly because you are the one entering it in the calculator to solve for the answer. If you have any questions, by all means, work together in your groups or come back and ask me in the back of the room.